Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to speak on Bill C-58 and perhaps set the record straight with respect to some of the remarks of my colleagues opposite, who loves to quote criticisms of the bill that took place before the committee studied it, before amendments were made addressing those very issues, and before the bill was even further strengthened, building on a historic improvement to access to information that this bill brings forward. So our government is firmly committed to being open and transparent. That's the kind of government that Canadians expect and deserve, and these reforms were made with that in mind.
We remain committed to respecting this principle, which was implemented for the first time in the Access to Information Act in 1983.
Our proposed reforms advance the original intent of the Act in a way that reflects today's technologies, policies, and legislation, and keeps this an evergreen process as well. And I'm proud that it is our government that is the government to finally update this Act, in contrast to the government of the members opposite, the Conservatives, who promised to reform this Act in their election platform, spent 10 years in government and actually failed to do a thing. So, Mr. Speaker, I experienced the former government's control tactics around access to information firsthand as an opposition member of Parliament. I filed an access to information request to find out more about the process for building Canada's pavilion for the 2010 Vancouver Olympic and Paralympic Games. This pavilion was to be built in Vancouver, and there were questions around it in the media. Lo and behold, when I received the response from the government, every single line in the document had been blacked out. Everything. There was not a scrap of information. And I would contend that Canada's Olympic pavilion was hardly a national security issue that had to be protected. So that's what the Conservative government of the day was doing, instead of actually fixing the Access to Information Act. So, perhaps they were also too busy becoming the first government in not just the history of Canada, but the history of the Commonwealth to be found in contempt of Parliament for refusing to provide information to Parliament. And let's not forget the extent to which the NDP was hesitant to join the trend when Liberal MPs became the first party to begin a practice of proactive disclosure of expenses. They needed to be dragged along with that. But I digress, Mr. Speaker. Our government is acting. We're following through on our election promise to reform the Access to Information Act.
Our efforts began over a year ago. In May 2016, we issued an interim directive that enshrined the idea of government being open by default.
Having a culture across the government in which data and information are increasingly released as a matter of course unless there are specific reasons not to do so.
Now with the amendments proposed in Bill C-58, we're taking the next step.
Bill C-58 advances the Access to Information Act in some key areas. It gives the Information Commissioner the power to order government to release records. That's exactly what she's been asking for. That's a significant increase in the power of the Commissioner. No longer is the Office of the Commissioner simply an ombudsperson. Now the office will have the power to compel government to release records. This bill puts the Prime Minister's office and ministers' offices inside the Act for the very first time, as promised, through legislative requirements for proactive disclosure. And the bill legislates proactive disclosure for administrative bodies that support the courts, Parliament, and other government institutions. This dramatically broadens the reach of Access to Information Act. The bill also mandates 5 year reviews of the Act, as I said, so it's an evergreen process of improvement. And what's more, it will require the departments regularly review the information being requested under the Act.
This will help us understand and increase the kinds of information that could be proactively published.
Developing a guide to provide requesters with clear information, clear explanations for exemptions and exclusions, We're investing in tools to make processing information requests more timely and efficient, for allowing federal institutions with the same minister to share request processing services for greater efficiency. And we are also increasing government training to get common and consistent interpretation and application of ATI rules.
We are moving to help government institutions weed out bad faith requests that put significant strain on the system.
Tying up government resources, such vexatious requests can interfere with an institution's ability to do its other work and to respond to other requests. Let me be clear, however. We have heard the concerns expressed about how we must safeguard against abuse of this proposed measure. And we've heard in particular the concerns raised by Indigenous groups regarding land claims. As the President of the Treasury Board said during second reading debate, a large or broad request, or one that causes the government discomfort, does not of itself represent bad faith on the part of the requester. Broad requests, particularly historical records to substantiate Indigenous claims, are legitimate and consistent with the spirit of the Act. But it was not enough for our government to clearly state our intentions in the House of Commons. And so the Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics has further strengthened Bill C-58 by amending the bill to make it explicit that no department can refuse a request simply because the subject, type of record, or date of record is not specified. The bill has also been amended to give the Information Commissioner veto power in advance over whether or not a department can reject a request. The committee also passed an amendment giving the Information Commissioner the power to publish the results of their investigations and to publish their orders, giving further leverage to the Commissioner's new powers, as was intended by the President of the Treasury Board and requested by the Commissioner. Our government firmly supports these amendments. In addition to the government's duty to assist, which is a fundamental obligation built into the Access to Information Act, our government is fully committed to fulfilling Canada's fiduciary obligation to assist First Nations in furthering their land claims. Mr. Speaker, after 34 years, Canada's ATI system needs updating, and this is going to be a work in progress. I am disappointed that the members opposite in both the Conservative Party and the NDP have been playing politics with this very important bill. They have been raising issues that were already addressed at committee, where amendments were passed to put to rest the concerns that were raised. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives, who never did anything for 10 years, even though they had put in their platform a solemn promise to update access to information and did nothing, are acting as though this is a step backward. Well, in fact, it is a step in advance in many, many respects, broadening the scope of the Act, respecting the Commissioner's request to have additional powers to determine if a department can or cannot refuse to fulfill an access to information request, order-making power to make sure that the order is published and publicly available to review. So a great number of key steps have been taken to advance the openness and transparency of the Canadian public with respect to information that they should and will have access to. The fact that the members opposite are pretending that no amendments were made, they're pretending that the Commissioner's report is still valid when it was written before these amendments responding to her concerns were actually debated and voted on by committee members, including the New Democratic Party members and the Conservative members, and wholly supported by the Liberal President for the Treasury Board and Liberal members. The fact that those are being ignored and these parties are aiming to confuse and confound the public debate and mislead members of the public who are listening to their speeches and question and answers is very discouraging and disappointing. This is one of those kinds of policy measures that everyone agrees needed to be improved. And that's exactly what we're doing, historically, for the first time in 34 years. That to try and confuse the public into thinking that this is a step back when it is a major leap forward is doing a disservice to the public. It's providing inaccurate information to the public. It's raising fears that are unnecessary around individual access to information, around Indigenous people's access to information around their records, and in pursuit of potential land claims. These things have been addressed, Mr. Speaker. We have a great deal of respect for the importance of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples right across this country. And one part of that is to support and aid individuals and groups who are seeking access to information in order to pursue that reconciliation, that partnership and that cooperation that our government is so committed to. So I would make this request to the members opposite. Stick to the facts, reflect what's happened in committee in terms of amendments that were made, reflect the ways in which the Commissioner and other groups' requests were actually built into those amendments by committee, and let's have a debate on the merits of this policy using the actual up-to-date factual information, and that would be a public service on the part of members opposite. So, as I said at the start of my speech, I am very proud that it is our Liberal government that is finally following through and finally giving the access to information some much-needed reform. There will be a review in just 1 year after the coming into force of this bill, so we will be able to do a continuous quality improvement process with this very important piece of legislation, this very important aspect of our public policy, where reviews are done and improvements can be made in a timely way. We have built that into our new act, and we are looking forward to continuing our work to help make government more open, transparent, and accountable. Thank you.